let's have Mark take over with Russ actually is going to represent Verizon, Neil, Molly, and Dave. So Mark, take it away.
Super, thanks, Joe. So welcome everybody again. So I just want to introduce and welcome Neil Buckley is with Apex, and he decided not to fly to US and is in South Africa. So welcome, Neil. Good evening, I assume. I'm not sure what time of day it is there, but glad to have you on. David Sonenstein was, I'm sorry?
Beer time.
There you go. David Sonenstein is with Staxos. Russell Peterson is with Verizon Wireless, and Molly Zraik, I probably chopped that up, sorry Molly, is with the Blaze Group. So, one of the things that as we are now in this new era of shelter in place for the last 9 months, at least us here in California, and also the economy has been hit. One of the things that I thought might be interesting is, how are we as TEM and like companies, how are we marketing ourselves to the enterprise? What is the enterprise really seeking in a technology expense management platform? And so first, Neil, maybe I'll bounce that to you and see what you guys are doing over there. Oops, Neil, you're frozen. Sure. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, so this I think depends obviously on the type of products that you sell, because it can differ quite extensively. But I think from a pure TEM perspective, one of the positioning statements we've been using now is really trying to provide customers with the ability or the solution to achieving visibility across a scattered workforce. Trying to manage costs and user consumption and inventory across a diverse workforce, obviously, is one of the positioning statements that we've attached ourselves onto. But I think moving the product aside, we've also tried to take a we're here to help approach, and try to approach customers with a very sincere and genuine approach, because a lot of organizations have had quite a lot of damage, collateral damage financially, obviously through COVID. And these enterprises have been trying to navigate their way through all this chaos. And one of the byproducts of COVID, obviously, is an increase in costs. We had a lot of customers all of a sudden thrust into this chaotic environment with loads of devices to manage, loads of new mobile devices that needed to be deployed to enable remote workers. And obviously, there's a huge cost associated to this. So this drove a lot of stress. So we try to take our product hat off to a large degree and take a very empathetic stance with customers. So we've been marketing ourselves as, we're here to help you get through this process, rather than seeing a sales opportunity and just trying to capitalize on that.
Super, thank you. And Steve, being in the agency broker business, I would expect that a lot of enterprises are kind of seeking out ways to either bust open their existing contracts or look at some very competitive pricing to reduce costs. What's happening there at Staxos in this environment?
Yeah, so we in very rare instances market directly to the enterprise. Really where we sit in the marketplace is enabling our TEM, WEM, MSP, enterprise mobility management partners with a big focus around automation and finding revenue in new areas, which ultimately allows them to provide better services to their end clients, whether it's automating MACD activities with wireless carriers, helping streamline the quoting process from a network perspective, providing new services such as AP automation. All of these have revenue that's very, very symbiotic with the services that our partners are providing today. And right now, everybody needs revenue, right? Everybody's looking for new ways to achieve revenue, and we help enable that both from a technology and channel perspective, but ultimately allows them to deliver their services in a more efficient way, in a more cost-productive way, and a more profitable way, which is a win-win for everybody.
Great, thank you. Molly, as a traditional TEM organization, what is the Blaze Group doing in terms of marketing your services in today's environment?
Okay, but I don't care if you butcher my personal name, but you got to get my company right. There's no L. Boz.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
I've never heard
Sorry,
anybody
he
do
called
that
me
before.
Steve, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. It's completely fine. I just couldn't let it go, you know.
Appreciate
Part of my
that.
marketing is make sure people actually know who we are and can find us. So no, I think, and I'm going to kind of capitalize on the second point that Neil had made about we're here to help. We've always positioned ourselves in that we're an extension of your team. You tell us what you think you need. You people go out, they put bids out. I think they need something, whether it's savings, whether it's, you know, organization. And as we listen to them, we always hear there's more that they need. There's different things. They don't quite have their problem nailed down. So we've always positioned ourselves as that, you know, we know the industry well enough to give you what you don't know need. So really, how do we help you even figure out your needs and then deliver on those? And I think now more than ever, that's pretty prevalent in the COVID world, with people not knowing how to solve some of these problems. So helping them understand, given as we work in this TEM industry, knowing this technology so well, we can often find different, we actually can retarget a problem, which brings a whole different solution, which actually solves their goals better than how they think they would.
Great. Thank you, Molly, from the Boz Group. Russell, I'll reach out to you. In terms of Verizon Wireless, you know, one of the things we've seen is a quick deployment of wireless devices for those non-corporate liable people. We have some clients that want to do contract tracing, et cetera. What are you seeing in terms of organizations in today's marketplace they're really seeking?
From a seeking perspective, customers are looking for quick deployment, ease of use, and just understanding what will make their lives a lot easier and a lot more productive, right? So Verizon has obviously, much like our competitors, have been very nimble in this ask, right? So we faced, much like everybody, an issue with hardware restraints and the ability to quickly get these items out. So we had to come up with new options and new avenues in order to make things work for folks. So for example, we shifted the focus from maybe a mobile jetpack to a MiFi, or a MiFi unit, to a basic phone with a hotspot capability on it, where it would kill, kind of two birds in one, with communication capabilities and then obviously hotspot capabilities. So I think the ability to be nimble has been really important. But then obviously having trusted partners like the kind folks that are on this call with us, to be able to get that out to them, to the customer base as well, and to the masses. Great,
thanks, Russell. Dave, I'll turn this over to you. And in terms of, cost savings has always been top of mind for the CFO, the CIO, et cetera. And now more than ever, I think we're seeing that more. And it's one of the things that, as an industry association, we've tried to not make the primary focus point of organizations seeking platforms such as all of ours. But as cost savings has always been the focus of enterprises seeking TEM solutions, what other value propositions do you see out there?
Yeah, that expense part of TEM has been a bit of a dirty word for a number of years. And even in our interactions with our carrier partners, that's a very big misconception that that's what this industry is really all about. From a wireless perspective, it's really evolved into enterprise mobility management, and being able to offload end user support and carrier interaction. And that's really, at least in my perception and the partners we work with, that's 80% of the business, right? When it comes to wireless management, I think the audits and the optimization are good when utilized. Oftentimes you have someone on the client side who's keeping that in the back pocket for when budgets roll around, so they can drop that trump card, right? When they're asking for more money, or there's an organizational change. And it's really not the key driver, as it is the organization, the cost allocation, the end user support that companies truly do want to outsource. And then you also look at, carrier, network sourcing. It's a real big headache to get out there and meet with all the carriers and look for proposals, and being able to streamline that into a project that's managed by your service provider is a huge focus, especially as people are moving to SD-WAN and UCaaS and so forth. And once again, AP is another big one. That, hey, if we're touching your bills, why don't we pay them, right? And help streamline that for you. And, these are all services that, the organizations on this group can do today. And we'd be happy to help guide you in the right direction if you have questions about that. They all carry revenue. But for the enterprise, it's really almost a renaissance of managed services. But it may be delivered through technology or by people, but it's really outsourcing those activities so the companies and your end clients can focus on their business.
Super. Thank you. Molly from the Boz Group, I'll turn it to you. So where are you seeing the additional value outside of expense relative to TEM Solutions?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to build a bit on what Dave had said in the overall management. And I think in the wireline world, I think an area that's really missed is capitalizing on the value of a really good inventory, not just what lines and circuits are where, but also what they're used for. We typically put that in the bucket of something the customer needs to pull together, but and I've not seen many that actually have the wherewithal and the time and the energy. The folks that would know that stuff they're going to stop and populate the tool. So by us really focusing on the value of that, of knowing what all those services are used for, and I think it's different in landline than in wireless, a different challenge. But by really putting a focus on the value of actually understanding what everything's used for, knowing how as your business changes, what to get rid of, what to change pretty easily, adds a lot of power in terms of understanding of the network and ultimately in ability to make strategic decisions and directions, to understand how much of the spend you can really touch with different initiatives. I don't think you really understand that very well without really strong understanding of how the inventory is used.
Great point. Yeah, I coined the adage years ago, you can't manage what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the inventory is paramount. Just a quick side note on that, about 3 or 4 years ago at our San Francisco ETMA conference, we put forth a white paper on what the ETMA organization defines as a solid inventory around all kinds of different domains within telecom. So please feel free to check out that on, I believe, Joe, that's on our web portal. So a great white paper we put forth because it is extremely valuable to have a robust and detailed and more importantly, accurate inventory in today's environment. So Neil, I guess I'll throw that over to you in terms of your clients, both regional but also global, in terms of what other values Apex is looking to present to them.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Molly. The inventory has become a huge focus area outside of just looking at cost savings. And Dave mentioned it, saving money, cost savings, and relating that to TEM. It's a dirty process, and you go down quite a deep rabbit hole if you're selling it on that basis. So some of the other value that we try and position is business continuity. A lot of customers, before we engage with them, are using homegrown databases or applications. They've got Excel spreadsheets that they're trying to manage these costs on. Or there's a single dependency on one individual within the business. And specifically now in COVID, there's been a lot of layoffs and retrenchments and so forth. And unknowingly, organizations may be laying off people that have got key insights and skills and IP around the telecoms environment. So the business continuity that a TEM platform provides is quite important. The reduction in, excuse my kids in the background. The reduction in time and resource is another huge value proposition. Trying to manage these complex environments manually is hugely time intensive. TEM obviously automates a lot of those processes and makes things a lot more seamless. I think Dave also mentioned that cost allocation and cost accountability is quite a big benefit, especially now where you've got a diverse workforce. You've potentially got regional management or business unit management that are responsible for a group of users working from home. They're now having to account for the costs, which is difficult to do without visibility. So cost accountability and cost allocation within the business is quite a useful value proposition as well. And then lastly, I think I'd probably mention, business insights. From a resource planning perspective, we've got a number of different customers who use our data to better understand the peak in their business. Which particular areas are on the phone more than others? Where are there incoming calls that are driving demand for additional resource? So by understanding the profile of incoming call traffic, for example, customers can now start to do better resource planning. So really just some of the business insights that you can derive from the data that TEM organizations inherently put into the business would be another huge value add for customers.
Great, thank you. So David, I'll reach to you. In working with a lot of different agency brokers as Staxos does, I would assume that you're also hearing from these sales folks, questions, concerns perhaps about the TEM industry. From your perspective, what do you see the enterprise? How do you see the enterprise's perception of the TEM industry? We've seen some amount of churn in the industry. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the initial kind of push was cost savings. So what do you see the enterprises and how they look at the TEM solution?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think we're still, reeling from some of the, overselling that has happened in our history. I think we've done a great job of helping exemplify that as a group, that's not what this industry is about. But, I do believe, I get asked all the time by organizations, consultants, hey, we're looking for a TEM vendor. Someone to, whether it's manage our wireless, manage everything, who would you recommend? And, my first question is, what type of organization are you looking to work with? And I think there's a wide array of buyer profiles. There are enterprises who are very technology forward, who are looking to automate and are looking for providers that leverage things like APIs and ServiceNow and are very technology oriented. You also have other organizations who, prefer a more managed service approach, where things are done and driven by human beings and so forth. And at the end of the day, I usually ask as well, what type of company is it that you find yourself best fit with? Do you want to work with a small firm where you're going to be talking directly to the CEO? Would you rather work with a large firm that has a massive amount of clients and a very good track record, but you may be a bit of a smaller fish in a big pond? So I think for every end client, there's something that they have in mind in terms of how they want that relationship to be. And I think the hardest thing is trying to match that organization up with the right firm or firms, so they're getting what their expectations are aligned with, whether it's a very technology-driven firm or it's a managed service firm or someone who just wants to know that, hey, if I have an issue, I can pick up the phone and call the CEO and escalate this very quickly, as opposed to going through, very large channels. So, I think that's the perception. And while, a lot of folks say, hey, I just want everybody to do everything, we're all specialists within this group, and it's, well, what are your top priorities? And let's try to match you with the organizations that specialize in what your priorities are, rather than a generalist.
Great, thank you. Molly, I'll kick it over to you as well. What do you see their perception of the TEM industry?
Yeah, the one thing that I think is really different now is that I'm finding more and more customers just accept that, of course, you have a TEM. Once they have one, they at least, I'm finding, I tend to understand, again, they all have their own reason or what they want it for, like David was saying, but more and more it's like, oh yeah, there's a TEM, I can use you or somebody else. Or I run into customers a lot when we see churn our clients and someone new comes in, oh yeah, it's more this idea of not who are you and what do you do. Oh my goodness, my dog just went crazy, I apologize. Who are we and what do you do? But of course you're a TEM, how are you going to meet my needs? So I think there's much more of an understanding of what we do, good or bad. And I find I'm less talking about what we do or what this role is or why I'm even needed, as I am talking more about how we can do it more appropriately to fit their needs. So it's less of a novelty anymore.
Great, thank you. Russell, I'll turn to you. In today's COVID world, how has marketing, wireless services changed? and how will it change once we come out of this pandemic?
Hey, Mark, I appreciate that. If you don't mind, I would like to talk about, I'll answer that question, but I'd also like to talk about the perspective for enterprises on the value of the TEM solution, if you don't mind.
Please.
Because I do think it's important to understand where, Verizon's standpoint is on the TEM solution. So we look at TEMS as a value added resource to the environment, and companies offering full lifecycle management are more inclined to touch revenue, expenses, and productivity. So when we have partners that are inside of this program that are able to touch all of those areas, I think it creates for a better experience. If you're only focused on expense management, the organization itself might be selling itself short. And we've seen some of those pitfalls over, not singling out anybody in particular on this call, or anybody for that matter, but we've seen some organizations where, clients have come to them and said, hey, we need to quickly deploy this, and they're not able to potentially provide that type of service. So, for us, I think about the value that we as an organization and collectively between Verizon and our partners, our trusted partners here in the group can offer. And we look at some of these solutions and we say, as a client, would they prefer to work with one vendor? So potentially David and his organization, or Neil or Molly, for example, and they can offer that full gamut of solutions, or would they prefer to work directly with a Verizon and the provider? And these large enterprises, in most cases, they prefer to work with a David, a Molly, or Neil that can provide that full lifecycle management. So I hope that helps in that scenario. So we're recognizing that more and more on a daily basis, and we appreciate what everybody's doing here. To shift to your next question, if you wouldn't mind repeating it, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure. During this COVID environment, how has marketing your services changed, and how do you see it when we come out of this any differently?
Oh, yeah, geez, absolutely. So organizations realized that they needed to shift on how they do business. And if you were a restaurant and you didn't use Uber Eats or DoorDash or one of those services, well, most likely you probably do now, right? So coming to companies that are ahead of the curve versus others who are realizing the need to use technology will continue to drive revenue and then manage expenses and increase productivity. That's why I love working for Verizon. We provide the network and enable partners to leverage our network and provide value to the end users. So, and once again, the folks that are here allow us to be able to complete that.
Great, thank you. Neil, don't know how different it is in South Africa relative to COVID and the marketing versus the States here, but maybe you can share some from a perspective of how it's changed for Apex.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. From a marketing perspective, yeah, everything's changed. In terms of how we market our services, we've got to be very specific about the approach we want to take. Budget goes without saying. It's taken a massive hit for everybody, including the TEM providers here in the conference today. So before we invest in any sort of marketing activities, we've got to be really considerate about where we want to apply those efforts. And we've had to change our language with the customers quite a lot. Excuses are rough now. The de facto standard for a customer, a new potential customer, when you engage with them, is that budgets have been cut, we're not spending right now, and it's an easy out. It's an easy way to close down the conversation for whatever the underlying reasons might be. So we've had to really try and reposition our approach with customers, both in terms of our electronic and telephonic marketing, but it's been really difficult. I would say on the plus side, specifically during the hard lockdowns we had here, and where there was travel restrictions, we knew a lot of the stakeholders were stuck in front of their computers at home. So in some respects, it was easier to get hold of these people because we knew they couldn't be on vacation, or they weren't meeting with anybody outside of the office. So at some point they were going to have to pick up the phone or return a phone call or an email. So yeah, I think it's just been a change of tactic. You know, and talking about how things will change once we come out of this pandemic. We were speaking about it in our Zoom room a bit earlier. You know, and a lot of these things are here to stay. You know, the way we engage with customers, this pandemic's going to be in flux, or the economy, the environment globally and locally for us is going to be in flux for a long time to come. So I don't see us necessarily reverting back to traditional ways of marketing the services. I think the opportunity now to get creative and find new opportunities that are successful will remain beyond the pandemic itself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, one of the questions that was posted here on the chat was, you know, how does now having people work from home, how has that changed? So one of the things I've had is a couple conversations with customers who said, you know, people were fine using their home internet, but now with their 2 or 3 kids home, having to Zoom into school, we're finding that the bandwidth is just so tough now that we're looking at now deploying thousands of broadband services to our home users. And so I was curious, maybe Molly, if you've had to experience anything like that in terms of a kind of a shift from what we call traditional corporate telecom services to more home-based services within your management.
We haven't done a lot of that yet. Certainly have had to do it in my home with 3 kids and my husband and I all at home and school. So that's definitely a real challenge. But you know, what we're seeing with so much SD-WAN and so much of it being broadband, we're doing tons of broadband deployments, even into the corporate offices. So it's not particularly different. You know, that's a whole different world, getting those services installed. But we're doing that. A lot of corporations are doing that for their, you know, branch offices, for the retail stores. So I see taking that and just extending it.
Great.
But I think the one thing though that where your TEM tool is really helpful, and I think what can be really leveraged here as folks do more of that, you know, most all of our tools now have this opportunity to, you know, tag your resources to a user. So now you know, any user doesn't just have a cell phone. They've got their cell phone, they have their license for Office 365 and whatever, Zoom and whatever cloud service. But then if they also are having circuits at their home, the value of that view by user, you know, manager views all their users services that they have, it can be a real strong selling point as we do more and more work from home and more, because those will get left behind. You leave the company, your broadband from your company ends up staying if it's not tracked well.
Great,
I think
thank
that's a huge
you.
opportunity for us.
We only have a couple minutes left. I guess my biggest or last question will be is, you know, how are you getting the message out about your firm during the pandemic? You know, we can't do the one-on-ones anymore. Russ, I'll start with you. Russell?
Yeah, so a couple of, sorry about that. I was
It's okay.
double, triple muted, you know, the world we live in today, right? So who let the dogs out, I think was one of the things that was on there. So for Verizon, we're doing a bunch of different things. So we do a daily Twitter feed, YouTube feed. It's up to date with Verizon and just kind of talks about our different things that we kind of have going on to support the community. We've also done different things for the community as well. We've done special concerts during the pandemic. And then, quite honestly, we're trying to leverage the different social media platforms and just, you know, let our folks know and let our partners know that, you know, I hate to use the cliche word like we're all in this together, but we understand that this is a trying time, and we understand exactly, you know, everybody is going through different challenges. So whether it's, you know, Molly at home with her 3 children and husband and dog, or, you know, myself personally, where my wife's an RN and she works in the hospital, and I have 2 girls, so I'm full-time employee plus full-time dad plus full-time husband plus, full-time teacher as well. I think that we're all becoming a little bit more understanding and how we support each other. And it's just a different world that we live in. Most of us were probably accustomed to traveling all the time, and that world halted. And now we're just, we have to be nimble. We're adapting, and so is Verizon, and I think the world is.
Great, thank you. David, with Staxos, I'll throw that one over to you. How are you guys getting the message out in this COVID?
Yeah, I think, professional networking has always been very important. I think that's why we're all members of ETMA here. But, what I've seen over the last, 8 months, what have you, is professional and social networks are really starting to intermingle, whether it's your friends, your neighbors. I'm sure everyone here knows someone who may have had their position eliminated, or where you put in phone calls to your network to see if someone else may have some use. And I think the willingness to open up your network to other folks in need has increased significantly as well. Even from our our perspective, we've done some exploratory work in different areas, and it's great to have this network to call when you have questions. But what I've really seen is social networks have become much more instrumental in business, and I think people are just more willing to say, "Hey, I know someone who can help you." And I think people are more willing to talk about their challenges in a social setting, their professional challenges, and people are more willing to take on those challenges and help them find a solution. And I think that's been a very interesting thing that's happened through this pandemic, is the combining of social and professional networks in the end to increase professional networks. And because you can't go meet someone in person, it is not uncommon for someone just to shoot an email and you go have a conversation with them. And so from that perspective, I think, all of us, I think, have very good professional networks, but they continue to grow leaps and bounds. I'm on the phone almost daily with folks that I didn't even know 6 or 7 months ago. And though I've not met them in person yet, I've grown very, very good personal relationships with them. And I think that's something that is a benefit that's come through this.
All right, great. We only have about a minute here. Molly, what are you guys doing differently in this COVID environment for marketing?
Well, I'm going to just stand right on really with what Dave said. I've never been one who likes networking, and I just not my thing, but COVID, it makes it so much easier. Schedule a call. It's acceptable that you're going to get on a call or you're going to do a video chat. So I've now got half an hour to have a conversation and move on. And I find that really effective. So I've just started making it, part of my to-do list is to have my, make sure I have at least 3 networking calls a week. And it's so much easier to do now than it was before. So this, in some ways, I think you get a lot more networking done. You're a lot more time effective with it. And it's just the way that it is. I can't meet you in person. So let's chat for a few minutes on a video call and go from there. And that's great.
Super, thank you. Neil, I'll close with you because Steve Haddock loves your accent so much. So I will close it with you with the same question.
Thanks, Steve. So apart from the obvious social media, not obvious, but I mean, that's sort of quite mainstream. We've been doing a lot of customer joint press releases. So putting case studies together about stuff we've done with customers during COVID. That hits home quite well because a lot of other businesses can relate. So those have been pretty successful, and we've pushed those out into our social media platforms and onto some of the media publications. We're also expanding our business partner network, so getting our reach out there through like-minded businesses that have opportunities within their own customer base, that are looking for new revenue streams. There's a lot of organizations and individuals out there now that are looking to create revenue streams for themselves because possibly they've been retrenched, or businesses have lost, obviously had some financial impact. So from a business partnership perspective, that's something we're focusing quite heavily on. And then also from a referral strategy perspective, we're actually putting a referral strategy in place now, going through our existing customer and business partner network and going and asking for referral business. It's something that we don't do often enough. We've got a great customer base out there with great relationships, and we just don't leverage it. And it's taken COVID to make us realize that we've got this on our doorstep, and so that's one of the other mechanisms that we're pursuing quite aggressively.
Super. Well, thank you all panelists for joining. Again, this is a great example of how valuable and powerful the association and the networking within can be to bounce ideas, thoughts, concerns, challenges you may be having, to reach out to a fellow peer and say, hey, are you open to having this discussion? You know, we don't want to share all of our tricks in our toolbox, but I think this demonstrates the value of that collaboration within your association. So Joe, I will turn that over to you.